They escorted me out of the office with an oversized security guard who had an unnatural smile and cheap cologne. It was the company I founded, and they thought they had erased me. But they forgot one thing, a single line in the contract. 4 weeks later, I returned with a $1 check and a mischievous smile. This story, not for those who skip the fine print. My name is Vivian Carter. I'm 34, and this is how I lost, then reclaimed, everything I built. 5 years ago, I was just another tech worker with an idea that wouldn't let me sleep. I'd spend my nights in my tiny Denver apartment coding what would eventually become Behavior AI, a customer behavior analysis system that could predict market shifts before they happened. The turning point came when my algorithm helped a major corporation avoid a billion-dollar PR disaster. That's when I knew I had something valuable. In the beginning, it was just me and my laptop. Then came Rachel, my first hire, a brilliant data scientist who believed in the vision enough to work for pizza and promises. Soon, our team grew to 8 people crammed into my living room, surviving on caffeine and determination. We built something beautiful together, code that understood human behavior better than most humans did. The day Sterling Grove Capital approached us was surreal. Their offices were all glass and confidence, with views of downtown that made you feel simultaneously important and insignificant. Martin Weiss, their managing partner, spoke of expansion, market dominance, and the kind of numbers that made my heart race. "We want to acquire your company, Ms. Carter. We believe in what you've built." It was flattering, terrifying, tempting. My lawyer, Marla Stevens, an old friend from college who'd become a corporate shark, reviewed their offer with narrowed eyes. "They're buying your baby for $1, she asked, tapping her pen against the contract. "It's symbolic," I explained. "The real value is in the equity package and my position as CSO. Marla wasn't convinced. "Let me add something," she said, inserting a clause that would later save everything. "If terminated without clear cause, founder reserves the right to repurchase company at acquisition price." "They'll never even notice that line," Marla assured me with a wink. I signed the papers. Sterling Grove Capital became Behavior AI's majority owner, and I became Chief Strategy Officer of my own creation. The money hit my account, life-changing figures that should have felt like victory. For the first 6 months, everything seemed perfect. We moved into sleek offices, hired top talent, launched new features. I still had a voice in company decisions, still felt connected to what we were building. Then Lucas Grant arrived. Lucas was everything Silicon Valley worshipped in a CEO, Harvard MBA. Perfect teeth, vocabulary full of synergy and disruptive innovation. The board brought him in to scale operations. But I knew what that really meant. They wanted someone who spoke their language. Alongside Lucas came Camilla Wynn, our new CMO, where Lucas was all corporate polish. Camilla was calculated charm. She wore influence like expensive perfume and collected connections like trading cards. The changes were subtle at first. Meeting invites stopped appearing in my inbox. My product suggestions were met with, "We'll consider that for phase 2, which everyone in tech knows means never. The development roadmap I'd created was scrapped for what Lucas called a more market-responsive approach. Our office transformed. The R&D lab where we'd done our best work became a mindfulness zone with beanbags and ambient sound machines. Our powerful AI platform, once praised for its sophisticated analytics, was repackaged with pastel colors and a hand-drawn bear mascot named Buddy. Customers find it more approachable. Camila explained during a rebrand presentation I wasn't asked to contribute to. When potential clients visited, I was introduced as the founding spirit of Behavior AI, a meaningless title that signaled I had no actual power. During these meetings, I'd watch Lucas present watered-down versions of my original algorithms while Camilla nodded enthusiastically beside him. The original team began to leave. First Sam, our mobile lead, then Julie from UX. They'd find me in the kitchen or elevator and apologize awkwardly, as if resigning was betraying me personally. I couldn't blame them. "It's not the same company anymore," Sam told me, box of desk items in his arms. And you're not the same boss. He was right. I wasn't their boss anymore. I was a relic, preserved behind glass for occasional viewing. Customers started to complain. The new simplified interface lost the depth that made our product valuable. Support tickets piled up. Lucas blamed user adjustment periods, while Camilla crafted glossy case studies that bore little resemblance to reality. One night, alone in my apartment, a much nicer apartment than before, but somehow emptier, I pulled out my acquisition contract. I reread Section 17B, the clause Marla had inserted. If terminated without clear cause, founder reserves the right to repurchase company at acquisition price, $1. That's what it would take to buy back everything if they fired me without cause. I laughed bitterly at the absurdity. They'd never fire me. I was the founding spirit, the human face they trotted out when they needed credibility. Besides, Sterling Grove had invested millions. Surely they'd protect their investment. A week later, Ryan, one of the few original engineers still at the company, caught me in the parking garage. "They're doing layoffs," he whispered. "Your name is on the list." I should have felt angry, betrayed. Instead, I felt a strange calm, the kind that comes when chaos finally aligns into clarity. That night, I wrote a check for $1. I signed my name with deliberate care, clipped it to a printed copy of Section 17B, and placed it in a white envelope. I put the envelope in my desk drawer and waited. The meeting happened on a Tuesday. My calendar simply showed HR discussion, conference room C. Lucas wasn't there, just Heather from HR and a security guard waiting discreetly by the door. "Vivian, this is difficult," Heather began, reading from what was clearly a prepared script. "The company is moving in a direction that requires different strategic leadership." She pushed a severance package across the table. 6 months' salary, non-disclosure agreement, non-compete clause. I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't sign. "I'll have my lawyer review this," I said, standing up. The security guard escorted me to my desk, watched as I collected my plants, photos, and the white envelope from my drawer. He followed me to the elevator, down to the lobby, and watched until I walked through the revolving door into the bright spring afternoon. By the time I reached my car, I was smiling. That evening, I mailed the envelope to Behavior AI's legal department. Then I called Marla. "They fired me," I said when she answered. "Without cause?" she asked, immediately understanding. "Different strategic leadership needs," I quoted. "Perfect," she said. "Now we wait." What followed was 3 days of silence. Then, an explosion. Marla received a call from Sterling Grove's legal team, demanding an explanation for the inappropriate correspondence. She calmly referenced Section 17B. "Ms. Carter is exercising her contractual right to repurchase the company at the acquisition price of $1, she explained. They argued, of course, claimed the clause was unenforceable, threatened litigation. But Marla had done her homework. Not only was the clause valid, but Sterling Grove had made a critical error. They had never fully completed the legal merger of my original company into their structure. The original entity, the one I had sold for $1, still existed as a shell holding key intellectual property rights. My $1 check was valid. I now owned my company again. The board went into emergency sessions. Lucas gave fiery interviews about hostile tactics. Camilla posted a lengthy LinkedIn article about negative women in tech. None of it mattered. Legally, I had won. Then came the customer exodus. 3 major clients terminated their contracts with Behavior AI within a week of the news breaking. One CEO even tweeted, "We signed with them because of her, not because of Buddy the Bear." As Sterling Grove's stock price began to wobble, Lucas attempted damage control. He launched a podcast series on authentic leadership that failed spectacularly when listeners pointed out the irony. Camila disappeared from social media after her LinkedIn post backfired. Meanwhile, I leased a small office space 2 blocks from Behavior AI's headquarters. I framed my copy of Section 17B and hung it on the wall. Marla joined me, along with Ryan and 2 other loyalists from the original team. We named ourselves Phoenix Data. with a simple logo, a phoenix rising from a dollar bill. Our tagline, reclaimed, refined, relentless. Within days, emails started arriving. Sam wanted to return. So did Julie. 3 other former employees reached out, ready to rebuild. Our first client meeting was with Westbrook Industries, a former behavior AI customer who had terminated their contract. Their CTO shook my hand with a knowing smile. "We missed your algorithms," he said simply. 2 months after my firing, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at Tech Forward, a prestigious industry conference. I was asked to replace a visionary guru who had canceled last minute. Standing on that stage, facing hundreds of industry peers, I told my story. From the Denver apartment to the $1 check. I held up the framed check, the real one, and the audience fell silent. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Marla. "Board resigned. You won." I smiled, not the professional smile I'd practiced for investor meetings, but the wolfish grin of someone who had hunted and caught her prey. In the weeks that followed, Sterling Grove's investment in behavior AI collapsed. Lucas posted a vague farewell message about pursuing new opportunities. Camilla turned off comments on all her social platforms. Investors pulled out. Meanwhile, Phoenix Data thrived. 3 former clients offered funding to help us expand, saying simply, "This time, we're investing in you." 6 months after being escorted from the building, I walked past Behavior AI's former headquarters. I looked up at the 5th-floor windows, once my view, then my prison, now dark and empty. I didn't need to look back. They thought I was just an old story, but I was the clause they forgot to read. And now, I was CEO again. This time, I owned every word in the contract. The revival of Phoenix Data wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about building something better. We moved beyond the original behavior AI concept, developing more sophisticated predictive models that incorporated ethical considerations from the ground up. Our new office grew organically. No venture capital this time. Just sustainable growth funded by clients who believed in our vision. The walls featured artwork from local Denver artists rather than motivational quotes. Meeting rooms were named after phoenixes from different mythologies, symbols of rebirth that reminded us where we'd come from. Sam rebuilt our mobile platform with features Lucas had deemed too complex for the average user. Julie redesigned the interface to be both powerful and intuitive, without a cartoon mascot in sight. Ryan led a team of engineers who weren't afraid to push boundaries. I implemented a new company structure, one that included employees and ownership through equity that actually meant something. Everyone who joined received transparent contracts with protections built in. We had weekly fine-print meetings where we discussed company decisions openly. Marla became our chief legal officer, vigilant about protecting what we were building. "No more $1 loopholes," she joked during her first day. "Unless they're ours." The tech world took notice. Our story became a case study at business schools. I started receiving emails from founders facing similar situations, seeking advice on protecting their companies from inside takeovers. Sterling Grove Capital faced its own reckoning. After our story went public, other founders came forward with similar experiences. The firm's reputation suffered, and several key partners left to form a more founder-friendly venture fund. Martin Weiss called me once, ostensibly to clear the air. "You could have been reasonable," he said. "We could have negotiated." "I was reasonable," I replied. "I paid the agreed price." Then I hung up. As Phoenix Data approached its first anniversary, we celebrated with a company retreat in the mountains, around a campfire. With the team that had followed me through disaster to rebirth, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened and what we had accomplished. "I want to thank you," I told them, voice catching slightly. "You didn't just help me reclaim a company, you helped build a better one." Sam raised his glass. "To the fine print," he toasted. Everyone laughed, but we all understood the truth behind the joke. Details matter, contracts matter, standing your ground matters. The Denver tech scene embraced us as a hometown success story. Local startups sought our advice. and we began a mentorship program for women founders. I made time to speak at universities, sharing not just our triumph, but the mistakes that preceded it. Trust is valuable. I would tell these young entrepreneurs, but verification is priceless. When Phoenix Data's valuation exceeded Behavior AI's peak, I received a congratulatory email from Lucas. It was brief, almost professional, but couldn't hide his bitterness. I never responded. Camila reinvented herself as an authentic leadership consultant, carefully omitting Behavior AI from her biography. Sometimes I would see her speaking at conferences, preaching transparency and founder respect. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 years after my firing, we moved into new headquarters, a renovated historic building in downtown Denver. During the office warming party, Ryan presented me with a gift: a custom-built algorithm that analyzed contract language for hidden risks and opportunities. "We're calling it the Carter Clause," he explained. "It flags anything that could be used against you later." It was the perfect gift: technology that protected people rather than exploited them. It embodied everything we stood for now. As Phoenix Data continued to grow, I made sure we never lost sight of what mattered. Our code remained elegant. Our culture remained honest. Our contracts remained fair. We expanded thoughtfully into international markets, always maintaining the core values that had survived the fall and rise. Sometimes, late at night, I would still find myself thinking about that security guard walking me out of the building. The humiliation of that moment had transformed into something powerful. A reminder that endings can become beginnings if you're brave enough to insist on your worth. When business magazines began listing me among tech's most influential leaders, I always redirected the conversation to our team and our technology. But privately, I couldn't help but appreciate the symmetry of it all. They had tried to erase me from my own story, only to make me the protagonist of a much better one. 5 years after that fateful day in Conference Room C, I received an invitation to deliver the commencement address at my alma mater. Standing before thousands of graduates, I shared the lesson that had cost me so much to learn. Your ideas have value. I told them, your work has value, and most importantly, you have value. Never let anyone convince you to sign that away. Not for $1, not for $1 million. The applause was thunderous, but it wasn't the validation I needed anymore. My validation came from the company we had built, the culture we had created, and the knowledge that I had refused to disappear when that was exactly what was expected of me. They thought they were writing the end of my story. Instead, they just gave me a better beginning. The first anniversary of Phoenix Data coincided with a major technology conference in San Francisco. I had been invited to participate in a panel discussion about ethical AI implementation, a topic that had become our specialty since the rebirth of the company. The conference center buzzed with the usual energy: startup founders pitching to bored-looking investors, tech giants showcasing incremental innovations as revolutionary breakthroughs, and everywhere, the particular mix of hope and hustle that defines the industry. I arrived early for soundcheck and found myself face-to-face with Lucas Grant in the speaker's lounge. He had lost weight, and his perfectly tailored suit now hung slightly loose on his frame. The confident smile remained, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Vivian," he acknowledged with a nod. "Didn't realize you were speaking." "Ethical AI panel," I replied. "You?" "Venture funding in uncertain markets," he said. "Sterling Grove is launching a new fund." The awkward silence that followed said everything about our shared history. Finally, he cleared his throat. "What you did," he began. I cut him off. "What I did was enforce a contract. What you did was try to erase the person who created the value you were selling." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Business is business," he offered weakly. "Yes," I agreed. "And contracts are contracts." I walked away first, leaving him standing there like the ghost of a future I had narrowly escaped. The panel discussion was standing room only, partly due to interest in the topic, partly due to curiosity about me. The moderator introduced me as the founder who bought back her company for $1, which earned knowing laughter from the audience. Beside me sat representatives from major tech companies, all claiming commitment to ethical practices while their businesses often suggested otherwise. When asked about implementing ethics in AI systems, they spoke of guidelines and committees and superficial safeguards. When my turn came, I leaned into the microphone. Ethics isn't a feature you add after the product is built, I said. It's the foundation you build upon. At Phoenix Data, every algorithm we create begins with the question, how could this harm people if misused? The audience response told me we were onto something important, something that went beyond reclaiming a company. We were reclaiming the purpose of technology itself. After the panel, a young woman approached me, clutching a notebook. "I'm starting a company," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and terror. "And I'm about to take venture funding." "Congratulations," I replied. "After hearing your story, I'm scared," she admitted. "How do I protect myself? How do I make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to me?" I considered her question carefully. "Read every word of every contract," I finally said. "Understand that investors are buying a piece of your dream, not the right to take it from you, and build a team that believes in the vision more than the valuation." She scribbled frantically in her notebook. "Anything else?" I smiled. "Find a lawyer like Marla." That evening, at a reception overlooking the bay, I found myself surrounded by curious industry veterans eager to hear the unfiltered version of the Phoenix Data story. I obliged with the highlights, but kept the deepest truths to myself. How it felt to be deemed disposable, how sweet redemption tasted, how building something twice gave you perspective no first-time founder could possess. Martin Weiss appeared at the edge of the group, drink in hand, watching me hold court with what might have been respect or possibly regret. Our eyes met briefly before he turned away. Whatever closure he sought would have to come from within. I had nothing left to say to Sterling Grove Capital. The next morning, before flying back to Denver, I received a text from the young founder I'd spoken with. She had sent a photo of her contract with "What would Vivian do?" written in the margin beside the termination clauses. I smiled, realizing that perhaps the most valuable thing to emerge from my experience wasn't Phoenix Data itself, but the cautionary tale that might protect other founders from similar fates. Back in Denver, the company continued to evolve. We developed a reputation for turning down lucrative contracts when the intended use of our technology raised ethical concerns. This principled stance cost us in the short term, but built a brand identity that attracted both talent and clients who shared our values. 6 months after the San Francisco conference, we unveiled our most ambitious project yet, a predictive analytics system that helped organizations identify and address systemic biases in their decision-making processes. We called it Clarity, and it represented everything behavior AI could have been if profit hadn't replaced purpose. The launch event was held in our headquarters, with the original team front and center. Sam had developed elegant visualizations that made complex data patterns immediately comprehensible. Julie had designed an interface that guided users toward understanding rather than just action. Ryan's back-end architecture was a marvel of ethical engineering. As I watched them present their work with pride and precision, I realized how completely we had transcended the betrayal that had brought us to this point. We weren't defined by what had been taken from us, but by what we had chosen to build instead. After the presentations, as guests mingled and champagne flowed, Marla pulled me aside. "Sterling Grove's new fund is struggling," she informed me with the satisfied expression of someone delivering karmic news. "Turns out, their treatment of you became a red flag for potential partners." "I never wished them failure," I said honestly. "I know," Marla replied. "That's why you succeeded where they couldn't. You built something worth believing in." Later that night, alone in my office, I opened my laptop and pulled up the original code for behavior AI, lines I'd written in that tiny Denver apartment when the future was nothing but possibility. I scrolled through functions and algorithms that had once seemed so important, now looking primitive compared to what we'd created since. I closed the file without saving changes. Some chapters need to end for better ones to begin. The following week, I received an email from Heather, the HR representative who had delivered my termination. She was looking for a job. Behavior AI had finally collapsed entirely. Its assets sold off to cover debts, its offices dark. She apologized for her role in what had happened and asked if Phoenix Data might have a position available. I forwarded her resume to our actual HR director with a note, "Worth interviewing. Everyone deserves a second chance." I was living proof of that. As Phoenix Data approached its third year, we expanded into new headquarters that reflected our values: sustainable architecture, community spaces, and walls that displayed our code of ethics alongside our patents. We had grown to 60 employees, each one carefully selected not just for talent, but for alignment with our mission. One afternoon, I was giving a tour to potential clients when I noticed a framed dollar bill in the reception area. Not the famous check I'd written to reclaim the company, but a simple dollar with a note beside it. "Everything valuable begins with believing it has value." I hadn't put it there. Later, I learned it was a gift from the team, installed that morning as a surprise. Some nights, when the office was quiet and I was working late, I would think about the parallel universe where I hadn't fought back, where I had accepted the severance package and disappeared as expected. In that universe, behavior AI might still exist as a hollow version of my vision, and I might be starting over from scratch, bitter and diminished. Instead, I sat in an office buzzing with purpose, leading a company that existed because I had refused to accept an unjust ending. The journey had taught me that success isn't measured in exits and acquisitions, but in creating something that reflects your truest values, something worth fighting to reclaim. They had thought I was just a founder they could discard when convenient. They never understood I was actually the foundation. And foundations, when properly built, endure long after those who tried to replace them are gone. The story of Phoenix Data's rise from the ashes of behavior AI became legendary in startup circles. But legends have a way of simplifying complex truths. The reality was more nuanced than the triumphant narrative that circulated in business magazines and inspirational LinkedIn posts. The truth was, rebuilding wasn't easy. There were nights when I questioned everything, when the weight of responsibility toward our growing team kept me awake, staring at financial projections and wondering if I'd been foolish to reject acquisition offers that came our way after our success became evident. Lucas Grant resurfaced occasionally in the tech press, always with a new venture that promised disruption but delivered only incremental improvements on existing ideas. I never spoke about him publicly, but privately. I recognized a cautionary tale, a leader who mistook control for vision, who valued the appearance of innovation over its substance. Camilla Wynn reinvented herself completely, publishing a memoir that carefully rewrote her role in the behavior AI saga. She positioned herself as a witness to corporate overreach rather than a participant. The book sold moderately well, but was quietly mocked within the industry. I received dozens of copies from friends and colleagues, all with notes suggesting I might find it entertaining. I never opened a single one. 4 years after reclaiming my company, I was invited to testify before a congressional committee on protecting founders' rights and preventing predatory acquisition practices. The hearing room was packed with tech journalists and industry observers eager to hear the Phoenix Data story directly from the source. "Ms. Carter," the committee chair began, "your experience has become something of a cautionary tale in Silicon Valley. Could you explain to the committee how your situation might inform potential regulations?" Under the harsh lights, with cameras capturing every expression, I spoke carefully about the balance between encouraging investment and protecting innovation. I didn't vilify venture capital. It was, after all, essential to the ecosystem, but advocated for transparency and founder protections. The problem isn't investment itself, I explained. It's the disconnect between what investors say they're buying and what they actually intend to acquire. In my case, they claimed to value the vision but ultimately wanted only the technology and customer base. The founder, the source of the innovation, was treated as disposable. A senator interrupted, "But isn't that simply business? Investors take risks and deserve control proportionate to their investment." I leaned toward the microphone. "With respect, Senator, genuine innovation doesn't come from treating creators as temporary components to be discarded. The best technology emerges from consistent vision and values. When you remove the heart of a company, its founding purpose, you often destroy the very thing you paid for. My testimony generated substantial media coverage, with industry publications analyzing every word. Some praised my advocacy, others labeled me anti-investment. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. Back in Denver, Phoenix Data continued its steady growth. We developed a reputation for turning down flashy acquisition offers that didn't align with our values, a luxury afforded by our profitability and independence. Instead of selling to the highest bidder, we formed strategic partnerships that expanded our reach while preserving our autonomy. For our 5th anniversary, we hosted a celebration that doubled as the launch of our most ambitious project yet, an open-source framework for ethical AI implementation that we made freely available to startups and established companies alike. Why give away what we could sell? A new team member asked during planning. Because some ideas should belong to everyone, I explained. And because the best protection against being erased is becoming essential. The framework was adopted quickly, establishing Phoenix Data as a thought leader in responsible technology development. Universities began incorporating it into their computer science curricula. Even competitors implemented portions of it, sometimes reluctantly acknowledging its source. As my public profile grew, so did interest in the full story behind Phoenix Data's creation. I received book offers and film rights inquiries, all promising to tell the real story of how I reclaimed my company. I declined them all. Some experiences are too personal to become entertainment, too nuanced to be compressed into a 3-act structure with a triumphant ending. The true legacy of what happened wasn't a dramatic narrative of revenge, but the company culture we had painstakingly built as a result. Phoenix Data became known for contracts that protected both the company and its employees, for transparent communication, and for a workplace where ethical concerns could be raised without fear of retaliation. We created an annual scholarship for founders from underrepresented backgrounds, providing not just funding, but mentorship through the complicated world of startup financing. Each recipient received personalized advice on protecting their vision while accessing necessary capital. 6 years after my ignominious escort from Behavior AI headquarters, I found myself back in that same building, now vacant and available for lease. The property manager, not recognizing me, gave a standard tour, pointing out features and amenities. The previous tenant was a tech company that didn't make it, he explained casually. Something about AI and customer data. The market's pretty saturated with that stuff now. I nodded, suppressing a smile as we passed what had once been my office, the corner suite where Lucas had delivered countless speeches about market dominance and aggressive growth. The space felt smaller than I remembered, the views less impressive. Thanks for the tour, I said as we finished. It's not quite what we're looking for. Phoenix Data eventually chose a different location for our expansion, a renovated warehouse with character and history, much like the company itself. During the renovation, we discovered the building had once housed a printing press that produced contract forms for local businesses in the 1920s. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. At the opening celebration for our new space, surrounded by the team that had grown from the ashes of betrayal, I finally felt something I hadn't expected: gratitude for what had happened. Not because it had been fair or deserved, but because it had forced me to define what truly mattered in building a company. To second chances, I toasted, raising my glass to the room, and to reading the fine print. Everyone laughed, but I meant it sincerely. That single clause, that $1, had been the fulcrum upon which my entire future had balanced. It had taught me that sometimes, the smallest details contain the most significant power. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Marla found me on the rooftop deck, looking out at the Denver skyline. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if they hadn't fired you?" she asked, joining me at the railing. I considered the question carefully. I'd probably still be there, I admitted, slowly compromising, gradually losing pieces of the original vision, telling myself it was worth it for the resources and reach. And now? Now I know better, I said simply. Some things aren't for sale at any price. As Phoenix Data entered its 7th year, I began to think about legacy and succession. The company had grown beyond my personal story into something with its own momentum and future. I started mentoring potential leaders from within the organization, preparing for a time when I might step back from daily operations. One particularly promising director, Alicia, reminded me of myself a decade earlier, brilliant, driven, and unwilling to separate ethics from innovation. During a strategy session, she proposed a bold new direction that initially made me uncomfortable with its departure from our established approach. Instead of dismissing it, I remembered how it felt to have my ideas sidelined by Lucas and Camilla. I listened, challenged her thinking respectfully, and ultimately approved a pilot project to test her concept. "Thank you for trusting me with this," she said afterward. "That's the real lesson from everything that happened," I told her. "Build something worth fighting for, then fight to keep it worth building." 8 years after being escorted from my own company, I received an unexpected email from Martin Weiss. Sterling Grove Capital was closing down after a series of failed investments and partner departures. He was writing to apologize, not just for what happened with behavior AI, but for the short-sightedness that had guided their investment strategy. "We mistook control for value," he wrote. "You understood something we didn't. That innovation isn't just about technology, but about the people and principles behind it." I read the email twice before responding with a simple message. Lesson learned. When Phoenix Data celebrated its 10th anniversary, we had grown from a scrappy resurrection to an industry leader with offices in 3 cities. The original team, Sam, Julie, Ryan, and the others who had followed me into uncertainty, now led departments and initiatives that had evolved far beyond our initial scope. The technology we built had matured from predictive analytics to interpretable AI systems that helped organizations make better decisions while understanding the reasoning behind them. Our clients included government agencies, healthcare systems, and educational institutions that valued both innovation and integrity. At the anniversary gala, surrounded by employees, clients, and partners who had been part of our journey, I found myself reflecting on the true meaning of value. Behavior AI had been valued at millions on paper, but its worth had proven ephemeral when separated from its purpose. Phoenix Data, built deliberately and ethically, had created deeper and more enduring value. During my speech that evening, I shared a thought that had been forming for years. Companies aren't just assets to be acquired and discarded. They're communities of purpose, collections of people working towards something meaningful. When we recognize that, we build things that last. Looking out at the faces of those who had helped transform a humiliation into a triumph, I felt a profound sense of completion. They had tried to write me out of my own story, but instead had only given me a better one to tell. The security guard with the cheap cologne, the conference room with the severance package, the dollar that bought back a dream. All of it had led here, to a company built not just on technology, but on the principle that some things are worth fighting for. They thought I was just a founder they could replace. They never understood I was actually an idea. And ideas, when protected and nurtured, can change everything.